Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Human Side. My name is Mitch Jackson. I would like to welcome you to the Human Side interviews. Today's guest is Mr. Jason Falls. Jason, how are you doing today, sir?
I am great, Mitch. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I really appreciate you being on the show. This is going to be exciting. We're going to cover all of the exciting things that you've been up to, a couple of books you've written in the past, and some of the things that you're looking at in 2015 to help all of us use digital, use the social platforms in a more effective way. Before we get started with today's show, let me remind everyone we've got some exciting guests coming up over the next couple of weeks. We've got Guy Kawasaki, Fitzpatrick or Fitzgerald, and let me just get that straight.
Fitzpatrick.
Okay, Fitzpatrick. I'm sorry, Peg. That's next week. We've got Chris Brogan, David Merriman Scott, a lot of movers and shakers. Shama Hyder's coming on. Go to human.social, check out the upcoming listings, and we'd love to have you join us on the show. Enough about that. Let's focus on Jason this morning. Let me introduce Jason to those of you that may not be familiar with him. And Jason, that would just be my friends. Everybody else in the world knows who you are. But Jason Falls is a digital strategist. He's an expert in digital marketing, public relations, social media marketing, social media crisis control, crisis communications. He's also the senior vice president of the digital marketing agency Elasticity. And I also read someplace, Jason, that you're known as the chief officer or instigator with the company. What in the world's that all about?
Well, it's just kind of my personality, you know. In the social space, if you're a blogger, if you do video interviews, if you create content, you are instigating to a degree. You're instigating a conversation. You're instigating thought, and I have a tendency to be a little bit out on the cutting edge of that. And when I say that, I don't mean to brag. I just mean to say I like to push the envelope. I like to make people think a little bit deeper and harder on things. So a lot of times I'll instigate a little bit of controversy and crisis just to keep people's blood going. And sometimes I even take stands on things that I don't believe in just to see what people will say. So I like to stir it up. So I'm a chief instigator. I like that title.
I like it too, and I'm going to adopt it if that's all right with you for some of the things we're doing here at the law firm. But let's shake things up a little bit. Let me tap into that particular trait of you. Let's put that instigator hat on, and let's talk a little bit about your book written in 2011. It's the No Bullshit Social Media. That's the title of your book. And I did pick it up and read it this week in preparation for today's interview. And what I noticed, Jason, is that a lot of frankly, all of the principles that you've shared in that book, to me, they seem to apply today in 2015, even though we're 4 years later. Is that your interpretation also, or are there any major mind shifts or changes that you'd like to bring to our attention that we need to focus on in 2015 that were not addressed in your original book?
No, I don't think anything has really changed much, which, you know, is kind of a testament to, you know, Eric Deckers, my co-author, and I think did a very nice job of thinking about this book as a strategic guide for using social media, not a tactical guide. The tools and the tactics will change. You know, Twitter and Facebook were certainly prevalent back then, but, you know, Snapchat and WhatsApp and some of these other platforms that have emerged over the last few years are not really included in the book. But the book is not about tactics, it's about strategy. It's about how a business, small or large, can look at social media, understand what the possibilities are in the social media space, what can you use social media for, then decide what you want to use it for your business. Because we spell out 7 business drivers of social media in the book, but you may only need to use 1 or 2 of them, or you may need to use 5, or you may need to use all 7. That's a matter of priority and need and budget. And so really the book is about how do you approach social media marketing. Is it different from other types of marketing, other channels? I don't know that I would argue that it is really all that different, but certainly there are some nuances that we talk about. And how do you build strategic plans to leverage those channels to move the needle on your business? None of those principles, theoretically, and knock on wood, fingers crossed and all that good stuff, none of that's going to change from 2011 to now. None of it's going to change for the next 5 or 10 years either, until some consumer behavior pattern radically shifts. The principles in that book are probably going to be pretty applicable to social media, and they may even be applicable in other marketing channels as well if you sort of put a filter on it.
when I was looking at the Amazon reviews before purchasing the book, what made me click the purchase and button were all of the outstanding testimonials about you and about the book from influencers in the industry. I mean, that's what made me take that next step, and I'd like to tip my hat to you. That's very, very impressive. The 7 things that I found in the book, you might have just alluded to, 7 things social can do for you. 1, enhance branding and awareness. Number 2, protect brand reputation. 3, enhance public relations. 4, build community. 5, enhance customer service. 6, facilitate research and development. And number 7, drive leads and sales. Let's go back to number 2, protect brand reputation. I want to direct your attention to the New England Patriots. Hashtag, what's the deal going on? Hashtag Deflategate?
Deflategate, yeah.
Deflategate. If they came to you this morning, let's say they came to you last Monday morning, the day after the game, and said, listen, there's an issue here, and we need to jump out ahead of it on social. What would you recommend that the Patriots do? What do you like as to how they've handled it on social? And what other elements could they have incorporated to maybe deal with the situation a little bit better, if at all?
Well, I think from what I've seen, and I haven't been, monitoring it really closely, but I think my advice to them would not be social media advice. It would just be good old-fashioned crisis communications advice. To be honest with you, from what I've seen from them, and I'm not necessarily a New England fan, nor am I an anti-New England guy, but I think what I would say to them is somebody has got to just come clean and be honest about it, because it doesn't sound to me like anybody in that organization is telling the truth. Bill Belichick probably knew something. Tom Brady probably knew something. The thing that baffles me is there's a referee that spots the ball after every down. How did the referee not get it? So there's a lot of question marks that just don't smell right. And if they don't smell right, there's probably some truth to the suspicion that more than a couple of people knew about this. So I would advise the New England Patriots to really be honest and get down to the nitty-gritty and say, look, okay, even worst case scenario, they say, you know what, we did it intentionally, we screwed up, we're really sorry, we won by 78 points or however many it was, so it doesn't really matter. Let's take our whipping and just fess up. I'm all for honesty and transparency when you can offer that and not really hurt yourself. And I think in this case, somebody just needs to fess up and say, this is what happened and we're sorry.
I think that's a good life lesson for anyone. I mean, that's what I preach in business. That's what I tell my kids. Without getting into the merits of what's happening with the Patriots and Deflategate, what kind of grabbed me is when you start seeing people on the news, regardless of the merits of the claims or who did what. My question wasn't really focused on that. You have people coming on. You have ex-NFL quarterbacks coming on and making statements as though they're fact. And it's an issue that needs to be addressed. It's an issue that's snowballing, and it's going to continue to snowball before the Super Bowl and probably after the Super Bowl. So it's important that they get out in front of it and deal with that. Obviously, honesty is the best policy, but you can't just have these ex-NFL quarterbacks come on the morning Today show and say, listen, I quarterbacked for 10 years. This is probably what happened. And it's not a good picture that they're painting. And that's why I brought it to your attention, because it seems like social would be a great way for them using old school marketing techniques and communication skills, but going online and basically dealing with these issues. I mean, whatever the issues are.
Well, I think another reason that I think it's less a social media thing and more of a crisis communications thing is because it is in the sports world. And I spent 15 years as a media relations, public relations guy in college athletics. And if there's one thing I can tell you about the sports world, it doesn't matter what the New England Patriots say. 90% of the people out there are going to call them cheaters and crooks and liars. The other 10% are going to, be their ardent fans and stand up for them. And so there's not a whole lot that they can do in winning the conversation by going to social media, unless they go to social media with full transparency and honesty and say, hey, this is what happened. Here's the series of events. This is what we're doing to address it. And we apologize if this disappointed you as a fan of the Patriots or as a fan of the NFL or whatever. But here's what happened. Here's what we're going to do to fix it and make sure it doesn't happen again. And we'll wait on the commissioner's decision on any sort of discipline that comes down from it. I still think it's a bigger crisis communications issue. In the sports world, it really has. Social media is always going to be 90-10. 90% of the people are going to talk bad about you, and the 10% of the people are going to scream your praises. And both of them are going to be equally irrational in doing so. That's sport.
When a company comes out and wants to do damage control, regardless of the industry, tapping into social, tapping into the digital platforms, can you share with us some of the things they may want to look at with respect to which platforms should they use and why, and how important is it to have the right spokesperson, the right spokespeople out on your behalf sharing your side of the story? To me, that's critical. Not that I want to go back to the New England situation, but I don't think Belichick's the right guy to have in front of a microphone. Okay? So that's my personal opinion. So, but just generally speaking, what are some of the things companies may want to look at when doing damage control and tapping into social?
So, before social media came about, the advice that communications professionals would give on that is make sure that your press spokesperson, the one who's going to be behind the podium at the press conference, the one who's going to do the interviews with the media, whether it be on TV or radio or over the phone or whatever, make sure that they are very well, clear and concise and tight on all of the messaging. Here's what happened, here's why, here's what we're doing about it, here are the 5 or 6 things we're going to say, and we're not going to say anything more. And you can draw a line and say, look, this is what we have to say about the matter. You can ask me all the different questions you want, but that's all we're going to say. Maybe it's legal reasons, maybe it's compliance reasons, whatever, but we're drawing the line. Make sure that person is buttoned up and they know how to deal with the media. They're well trained on not being led down a path and being suckered in to say something they shouldn't say, because good journalists will try to get you to do that. That's their job. I don't necessarily think that's a bad behavior. It's just their job to try to ask the question 4 or 5 ways and get a different answer if they can. And have that one person be the main point of contact. In the social media space, it's slightly different, but it's also slightly the same too, because whoever's manning Twitter or Facebook or your blog or your social networks has to be buttoned up, tight on messaging, know exactly what they can and cannot say. They need to be briefed and trained by legal and compliance folks within your organization, because they need to answer questions in real time. They don't need to stop, send an email to legal, wait on an approval, get that back, then communicate, because there's no such thing as a 24-hour news cycle anymore. It's about a 2-minute news cycle. And if you don't have the opportunity to jump in the conversation on Twitter or Facebook and respond, you're running the risk that the audience is going to go wild with whatever the hell they want to say, and it may or may not be accurate. So make sure that those people running your social channels, having the real-time interaction with fans, are prioritized and just as important on the scale as the person you're going to put behind the podium at the press conference. They need to be briefed. They need to know what they can and cannot say, and you need to have confidence in them that they'll be able to do that job and execute it well without putting your company at risk. What that means is, what that realistically translates to for most businesses is, stop putting an intern on Twitter. Stop putting green, untrained, new employees in charge of your social channels. These social channels are frontline contact points between your company and your customers and or the media and or the public. If you're not prioritizing the people that run those, you are putting your company at way more risk than you would by not answering questions for 2 or 3 hours or 2 or 3 days and just letting the crowd kind of run amok with your message.
Everyone, we're listening to Jason Falls at jasonfalls.com. Jason brings up an interesting question. In your book, you talked about how some companies, how some CEOs aren't interested in getting involved with social because they're afraid of what their employees are going to do. They're not going to use social the right way or correctly, or it might harm the company. Your comeback in the book had to do with the problem's not social. The problem is who you're hiring, who you're training. In other words, that's where the real problem is. Along those same lines with damage control, what are your thoughts if a company was set up correctly and the employees were trained properly, they had the right mindset with respect to social, and something happened to the company? I think under an ideal situation, would you assuming you've trained everyone correctly, you've got Twitter, you've got all the different accounts happening at once. Would the employees, would it be okay for them to go out and deal with these issues, being transparent and upfront with this 2-minute news cycle window that we're talking about? Or do you think that's just not reality and it's best to have a specific set group of people who are your front people dealing with crises on social media?
Right. I don't think I would ever recommend that a company in a crisis situation or a sensitive situation give free rein to every employee to go say what they want to say to defend the company, etc. You have to have policies in place where you say, okay, look, in certain situations when we have an executive shakeup, when we have some sort of crisis situation for the company, some sort of negative publicity, then everything needs to funnel through the official communications channels, whether it be customer service or public relations or social media department or whatever. And if anybody asks you, the policy is, if you're not in those departments and you're not in the crisis communications chain of command, the policy is to route any questions to those people. Let the professionals and the people that are trained within your company handle that. If you go on your Facebook page and someone says, hey man, I saw your CEO got fired, what's up with that? Your response should be, I'm really not allowed to talk about it, but you can ask the folks that are running our social channels. Here's the Facebook page, here's the Twitter account. They can answer questions on behalf of the company, but as part of my employment contract, I'm not really allowed to talk about it. There's not a whole lot your friends are going to come back and criticize you for on that. You're just trying to keep your job and keep your nose clean. But that's why you have a good policy in place for those types of things. It's perfectly fine for the company to have a policy of, hey, we want you to use social media. We want you to tell people you work here. We would love it if you optionally wanted to promote our stuff. I don't think companies should force their employees to promote company blog posts and things like that. But if you want to, if you're really gung-ho about what we're doing and you want to share what we do with your network, we would be honored if you did that. If you want to raise your hand and volunteer to help us as an official sort of internal ambassador, we would love for you to do that too. But in certain circumstances, we're going to have to lock down a policy and say, okay, everybody's got to route folks to PR or whatever to make sure that we're speaking consistently, that we're not putting the company at risk by saying anything from a legal or a compliance standpoint that could potentially hurt us. And so that's the policy. Free and open as long as it's positive and cool and it's not a controversy. But when the controversies come, when the sensitive subjects come, please route people to the appropriate channel.
I love it. That's old school, real world, good business advice that happens to touch upon social. And I think I think you hit it right on the head. In your book, you talked about companies and people, professionals. One of the reasons I wanted to have you on is small company professionals tapping into social to build relationships, help others, answer questions in real time. There's a new mindset that's required. And in your book, you talked about 5 or 6 different mind shifts that people need to get and understand in order to properly engage others on social. My question to you is, and I don't want to put you on the spot, and I've got them right here, can you talk a little bit about those mind shifts and, once again, fast forwarding from 2011 to 2015? Have any of those mind shifts changed and or any of them pick up a bit more importance than maybe some of the other mind shifts?
So read the mind shifts off to me. I haven't reviewed them in a while.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's why I offered to do it. It's just mind shift number 1. If you want people to trust you, you need to trust them, namely employees and customers. We've kind of touched upon that. Number 2, it's not about the sale, it's about the lifetime value of the customer. Number 3, online is no different than offline. Number 4, there's an audience for everything, but bigger audiences are available beyond the spray. Number 5, measure what matters. Not everything you can find or come across actually matters, so just keep track of the important stuff. Right. And then there's a caveat you put out there, which I thought was really good, and it's your social media fans are a subset of your customer base. And as we fast forward over the last 4 years, I mean, what's happened is audio, whether it's podcasting, video, shows like this, it's a lot easier for businesses to tap into and do. You don't have to be a technical genius to have your own television show anymore. So with all of that in mind, what are some of the mindsets that companies, CEOs, business owners need to have today to properly move forward on the digital platforms, taking into consideration the platforms that are a little bit more popular today than maybe what we had 5, 6, 7 years ago?
Right. Well, and I appreciate you reading those mind shifts off to me. I just didn't remember them off the top of my head, and as soon as you started reading them, I was like, "Oh yeah, that list." So I appreciate I appreciate you reading my own book to me.
But Jason, in all fairness, you had a lot of great bullet points, and so.
Well, I appreciate that. So I don't think any of those mind shifts have changed. You know, and that I don't think that it matters what the medium is, whether it's audio, whether it's video. Your social media audience, the people that are going to pay attention to you online, are still a subset of your audience. There are going to be a different segment of people who pay attention to you online that aren't necessarily your customers. For whatever reason, they're going to say, okay, that company has interesting content. They don't necessarily sell anything that I'm going to buy, but I'm interested in that topic for whatever reason. It might be, you know, someone with a competitor. It might be a salesperson within your industry that's in a parallel sort of vertical, but there's going to be a subset that's not even your customer base. That's the power of publishing in this sort of democratized media landscape now, is that your audience is really only limited to the number of people you can get to look at your stuff. But your core audience, the ones you really care about, are just going to be a subset of your main customer base and your main customer audience. And as time has gone on, the only difference is that subset in percentage, you know, per capita, is growing because more and more people are going online. More and more people are consuming media online versus offline and traditional mechanisms. So that's definitely still very much the case and still very true. So I don't know that I would change any of those at all. You still need to have the honesty and transparency. You still need to have open communications with your own employees and trust them. Again, I go back to what we call in the book the social media purists, who started out by saying that social media was an atmosphere where you don't sell things and it's all about friendships and building relationships and joining the conversation. I don't agree with the social media purists all the way. Yes, it's an environment for building relationships, joining the conversation, you know, trying to establish a friendship, a kinship with your audience, with your customers, or with the public. But you absolutely can sell things via social media. You absolutely can use it for business purposes, and you can measure it for business purposes. So the mind shifts haven't changed. I think what's gotten different since we published the book in 2011 is that more and more businesses have gone, aha, this can be a nice balance of soft metrics, building relationships, branding awareness, and drive sales, drive leads, direct response kind of mechanisms. And the ones that are doing it well are combining those two in interesting ways.
It's gotten a lot easier to get your message out there. It's easier for a company to engage others on social. And what I've noticed is just because it's easier doesn't necessarily mean that company is going to be putting out a good, positive message. At one time, you had to prepare and spend time to get your message out there, and now with a couple of mouse clicks, your CEO can be broadcasted across the world. What are your thoughts for companies wanting to venture out onto social a little bit more than maybe what they've been doing, the digital platforms, whatever the platform may be, and spending time to make sure that they're going about it the right way? They've got the right person, the right technology, someone that has the ability to properly communicate with his or her audience and things like that. I just see a lot of efforts out there that are really misguided, and I think they're shooting themselves in the foot as opposed to getting a good positive message out there, and it's all because it's so easy to do now.
Yeah, I think there's actually two sort of points and questions wrapped up in your question you just asked. Let me directly answer.
So, are you objecting? Are you objecting and saying that was a compound question?
No, I'm not objecting. You said something that made me think of one thing, but I'll come back to that in a minute.
Sure.
All right. So, first of all, let me address the direct question. The difference between the companies that are jumping into social media and producing content which all of this is just content, whether it's a video or a blog post or a tweet or a Facebook or an Instagram picture or whatever. It's just content, right? The difference between the companies that are producing content and the companies that are doing outstanding things in engaging their audiences in social media are the ones who understand all of what you just said. It's got to be the right person. It's got to be the right message. It's got to be used strategically. You have to have a reason to talk to these people, and you have to provide them with something they want, not a message that you want them to hear. Too many companies come to social media and say, I'm the CEO of this company, and here's my product, and here's what it does. That's not social. That's blasting a message. That's an advertisement. And a very small number of people will respond to an advertisement. Doesn't mean it's not worth doing. Doesn't mean it doesn't have value. It just means don't kid yourself. You're not being social. You're blasting a message. When a company comes, and I'll use the same type of example, although I don't know that this is always right for folks. When a company comes to the forefront and says, hi, I'm the CEO of this company. We know a lot about X. What can we help you figure out in your life? That's all of a sudden a different position. And it all of a sudden makes the audience go, oh, wait a minute, you're not asking me to write you a check or give you my credit card? Well, actually, now that I think about it, I need help with this one issue. What do you know? Well, here's what we know, right? And all of a sudden, that company, that CEO, that contact has become of value to you, which means you're going to come back to them. And after a period of time of you building a relationship and coming back to them, they might say, hey, by the way, if you're interested, I love the phrase if you're interested, because if you're not, then you're not, and you just move on. You don't get upset about it. But if they say, if you're interested, we've got a promotion going on right now on this particular thing. If you're not, no big deal, but we know you, we've had a relationship we've built up online over time. We're selling something. If you want to buy it, great. If no, then we'll see you back on Monday, right? So that's kind of a very simple look at how social marketing works well. You build that trust and relationship with the audience. Over time, they come to know you, trust you, and value you. And then when they're ready to buy whatever it is that you sell, A, they're probably going to think of you first because they have a relationship with you. And if not, then you have the opportunity to say, by the way, we've got an offer for you if you're interested in buying that right now. If you're not, that's cool. And so it's kind of a soft sell mechanism. So that's what I would say the difference is between those that are just kind of trying it and those that are really doing it, is they have the audience mindset as the priority, not their own. Now, the thing I thought about when you said it's easier now, or it's very easy now to get your content out there, I would reword that. I don't think it's easy to get your content out there. I think it's easy to create the content. It's easy to do a video. It's easy to take a picture and throw it up on the internet. It's easy to write blog posts. The mechanisms are pretty cheap. Some of them are free. And if you can produce the content, you can put it out there. The hard part is getting people to see it and care about it. And that is a combination of two things. It's number one, the content creation process in and of itself. You can create content, or you can create holy smokes content. And I'll tell you what holy smokes content is in a minute.
I love it.
But even if you create the holy smokes content, you still have to be able to tell everybody it's there. The internet is not a place where if you build it, they will come. It's a place where if you build it and promote the crap out of it, they might come. And so you've got to become really good at distribution of content, publicity, promotions, marketing. You have to, my friend Jay Baer likes to say, you have to market your marketing. So you do something cool for your customers, but you got to tell everybody about it or nobody's going to see it.
Right.
So coming back to the notion of producing content versus producing holy smokes content. Holy smokes content, my argument is we as marketers, because of this, and the reason, by the way, that it's harder to get your content out there, or it's hard to get your content out there, is because we have such a fractured media landscape, and there are so many different channels of information, even individual. Like, I have a Twitter account, Jason Falls. This one person has a broadcast distribution point for his life, and I have that on multiple channels, not just Twitter. If every single person out there in the United States has that, which they all have access to it, not all of them are using it, that's 400 million individual channels for us to choose from, and that's just on the damn internet. That doesn't count cable and magazines and all that kind of stuff, right? So our media landscape is so fractured that getting people's attention in that landscape, that's tough. It's really hard to separate yourself as signal from the noise. So you've got content, you got holy smokes content. That's what separates the signal from the noise. Your job as a business, as a marketer, as a content producer, is to produce content that when the audience that it's intended to reach consumes it, they go, holy smokes, that's insert adjective here. It could be that's awesome, it could be that's funny, that's sad, that's interesting, that's something I need to write down, that's something I need to share with my friends. I need to click the like button. Your job is to elicit an emotional response, which is to make them say, holy smokes. You're not going to do it 100% of the time. But if that's your goal, and every time you create content, you ask yourself, is this going to make my audience say, holy smokes? If the answer is even close to yes, go ahead and publish it. If it's not, don't, because then you just become noise.
Holy smokes. I loved it. Jason, that was awesome. Jason Falls at jasonfalls.com. Yeah, I think what I was alluding to is creating it's one thing, doing it the right way, and creating holy smokes content is a completely other. And with respect to lawyers who have a tendency to jump up on the soapbox and broadcast how great they are about something, what I tell them is approach it from a different perspective. How can you help your viewers? How can you help people that have legal questions? Offer help, offer assistance. No strings attached. Be very transparent about it. You're not giving away the secret sauce. These people, the legal system's too complicated for most people to handle things on their own anyway, but what you're doing is you're developing a relationship. And like you said, if you're putting out holy smokes type of content and solutions and answers when they need a lawyer, when they need an accountant, when they need a digital media consultant, guess who they're going to call? And by the way, one of your holy smokes content that attracted me right off the bat had to do with at your jasonfalls.com website, you talked about your 2 kids wanting to have a pet. And you then have it underlined, they now have a cat.
Right. Yeah, and that's just clever writing, but sometimes those little one-off one-lines, it's the end of my biography that says, I live in Louisville with my wife and 2 kids who are unsuccessfully arguing for a pet with a strike through, and now it says who now have 2 cats or whatever. So it's huge. Sometimes it's the subtle things that are holy smokes.
Yeah, I mean, I had an example with my daughter running cross country, and the first client I ever had back in 1986 that's been on my mailing list, my snail mail, my email list, what have you. I didn't hear from him for 20 years. And when I started posting pictures of my daughter running at Danny Hills High School, that's when he reached out to me. He used to run cross country, and the relationship was formed, and referrals then followed thereafter. Let's talk a little bit about not necessarily your family, but let's talk about and go back in time to Jason Falls back in the beginning. You talked about doing sports in college as far as broadcasting, reporting, things like that. What got you interested in the media publishing business? What got you interested in reporting, in consulting, in marketing, and then eventually onto the digital platforms, if you don't mind sharing?
No, I don't mind sharing at all, and I'm glad you asked because I don't take nearly as many opportunities as I could to thank my mom. And my mother, when I was a kid, my mom was a single parent until I was about 10 years old. And so it was just me and my mom for a long time. And we lived in a really small town in eastern Kentucky, and she was the editor of the local newspaper when I was very young. And so I grew up in a newsroom smelling newsprint and learning how to, or at least watching people lay out and design a newspaper on the old cutting boards with the, the wax Veritite paper and X-Acto knives and all that stuff, right, back in the day. And so I grew up in a newspaper, and seeing your name in newsprint just fascinated me. And when she would write a column and mention me, or when my picture would be in the paper for some school play or whatever, I was always excited about it. And so I kind of grew up in the communications world. My whole family that was what they did. When my mom and stepdad got married when I was 10 years old, they left the newspaper business and started their own printing company. So they were kind of a quick printer. And so everywhere I went, all I could smell was ink. So maybe that's why I have brain damage, and that's why I am the way. But when I was in high school, I wanted to. My mom would. This is one of those kind of negative stories that turned out to be positive. So when I got to be 12 or 13 years old, I now had a younger brother and sister that my mom and stepdad had, and my mom would leave me a list of chores to do after school, and I hated it. I was like, I don't want to do chores. This is not my house. There's not my kids. I'm not doing all this crap. So I told her one day, I said, if I get a job, will you stop leaving me chores? And she said, yeah, you get a job, I'll stop leaving you chores to do. So I went and got a job, but I was like, I don't want to work at the movie theater. I don't want to work at the convenience store. I want to be cool. So I marched into the radio station and said, I want to be a DJ. And they gave me some AP wire copy and said, go in the studio and read this into the microphone. And they were listening on the little intercom in the next room. And I did my best Wolfman Jack impersonation and came out. And they said, you start Friday. And they trained me. I was 14, 15 years old. They trained me how to be a DJ, and it kind of blew up from there. So I was always in the media world. Kind of combined that with the fact that in high school I started getting geeked out on computers, and this internet thing was starting to happen, and you could go on the internet into a monochrome browser and text only browse the USA Today. Like you had to click on sports, and then you'd have a list of categories. Click on baseball, and then a list of categories, and click on Pittsburgh Pirates, and then a list of things would come up, and it was all text. It was just blue and light blue text on a monochrome monitor. And I was blown away that I could go read things from around the world, and then I found these little bulletin boards where you could talk to people, and that blew my mind. And so I just kind of geeked out on computers, and one thing led to another. I ended up writing a column for the newspaper that my mom used to be the editor for, and I published that column online as well because the newspaper didn't have its own website at the time. And then they fired me because they didn't like my sense of humor, and so I kept publishing it, and I had a blog, and that was 1997. So that was long before anybody even knew what a blog was.
Sure.
And just kind of fast forward through a PR career in sports and whatnot, I was constantly trying to use the internet and technology to help me communicate better, and landed in 2006 at Doe Anderson, an ad agency here in Louisville, and the clients were really thirsty for someone to help them figure out this internet social networking thing, and I've been doing it, for 10 years, and so I just started advising clients, and they started loving it.
So my daughter's 20 at UCLA, and let's just say she's the next Jason Falls. Graduating from school. She's a communications major. She's got a lot of big ideas, but put yourself in her shoes today. 2015, let's say she wants to focus on following in your footsteps, following in marketing and digital platforms. She actually interned a couple summers ago for Tim McDonald of Huffington Post, and Tim was nice enough to set her up with that. Having said all that, what would Jason Falls do today? If you went to college and you're graduating from college and you wanted to follow in your same footsteps, what different changes would you make, if any?
I think you got to remember, from a social media marketing perspective, from what I do now, I really didn't start that until I was well into my 30s. I spent 15, 18 years in sports journalism and PR, and in 2006, I started writing Social Media Explorer, which was the first blog that I kind of built into a pretty large, following, at least within that social marketing niche. So I think what I would do is the same thing I did then. Obviously, starting out younger, I would carve out the whatever I'm really passionate about, whether it be social marketing or even more specifically Facebook marketing, whatever it is. So find something that I'm really passionate about that I just want to talk about all the time, and I would try to establish thought leadership in that particular area through a blog or sharing social posts and whatnot to say, hey, I know something about this topic area, and I would build an audience over time of people that are relying on me for expertise on that area, and then I would take that and parlay it the way I have with social marketing into media interviews, being asked to be on people's web shows and podcasts to again expand my audience. I would probably then try to come up with some sort of online learning platform where people pay a premium to see the really meaty content that I can produce, and/or I would leverage that to get on with a more well-established resource like Marketing Profs or Huffington Post or Wired Magazine to become, a journalist in that area. That would be my thing, because I'm a content creator. I can work for an agency and create content for clients. I can go work for a brand and create content internally. But ultimately, I'm a content creator, so I'm going to need to write. I'm going to need to produce videos. I'm going to need to produce audio. That's what I do. And so for me personally, I would do almost exactly what I did with Social Media Explorer, starting over. I might pencil in a little bit more on a specific niche, or I might broaden it and say I want to be more widely known as being a marketing guy, not just a social marketing guy. But I think that's what I do: establish thought leadership and try to parlay that into monetization streams for your content.
Along those lines, and I don't want to keep you much longer, Jason, but along those lines, would you put any emphasis towards doing all the above with mobile in mind? Mobile type of content that can be easily digested on smartphones and tablets, or would that just be a byproduct of first write or do what you want to do, follow your passions or your interests so that you enjoy what you're doing, and then the content just naturally ends up, where it ends up? I mean, is mobile part of your vision with respect to all the above?
Yeah, I think mobile is definitely in the back of my mind. I don't think it's in the front of my mind. But the reason it's not in the front of my mind is everything that we produce these days is going to be consumed on a mobile platform. Desktop experiences online are becoming the exception, not the rule. People are using 3-inch screens, 4-inch screens, 7-inch screens to consume their content. I consume a great deal of my even traditional media content now on a tablet, because I sit down at the end of the day, and that's like I'm turning off my work brain, and when I pick up my tablet, I get to play now. And so mobile has got to be in our mindset, but I'm going to create content that's really good. Part of the process after the content is created is figuring out how does that work in mobile. If I can't get it to work in mobile, then I might go back and say, okay, let's create the content a little differently. But for the most part, every time you do a video, every time you do an audio recording podcast, every time you write a blog post, every time you compose something for a social network, the tools that are there have a tendency to flip it into mobile optimized format already. But yes, you've got to keep it in mind. You've got to remember that people are consuming here now, not here. But I don't think it changes the fact that you still have to create compelling content. It doesn't really matter what size it is if it doesn't draw people in and keep their attention.
What's interesting is some of the things that I'm doing, what I'm noticing now that we're back in high school with our son. He's a freshman in Dana Hills, and we're very connected with all the programs. We're involved. But I noticed all the kids, when they're following some of the things that I'm doing, everything's on mobile. I mean, if I don't put together something, an interview, a podcast, whatever it might be, that they can't watch primarily on their smartphones, it's not going to get viewed. Yeah. And I'm just watching teenagers, and that's where their head's at. A lot of them don't even have desktops or laptops or what have you. So it's just an interesting concept. I was wondering how much emphasis we could put on that. I don't want to keep you much longer, but let me ask you a question. You're done being a digital consultant. You put your tablet away for the weekend or for the night. What does Jason Falls enjoy doing when you're not online doing all your digital stuff? What else keeps you busy, and what are your passions?
Well, I've got 2 kids, so that's the default activity all the time. But I really enjoy it. I've got a 9-year-old son and a 6-year-old daughter, and my son and I are both sports nuts. So I spent a lot of years in athletics, so I'm a big sports guy. I love watching baseball, soccer, football, basketball to a degree, depending on. I don't like pro. College is my thing. But we watch a lot of sports together. I love playing with my daughter. She's a completely different being and a different animal. She's much more of a singing, dancing, acting. She's a performer like me, but her interests are in that area where mine are kind of in other areas. But spending time with my kids, watching sports, and then I really like to kind of as a sidebar to my tendency to want to push other people's thinking, I like to have my thinking pushed. So I like to read. I like to study up on intellectuals, especially. I read a lot of biographies. Watch a lot of documentaries. And when in doubt, I'm probably going to turn on Netflix and find a really cool documentary to watch. That's kind of my default if it's just me hanging around the house.
Sounds like a great game plan. Jason, Jason Falls, jasonfalls.com. Thanks for being on the Human Side Interviews today. Really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day and sharing all of your tips of wisdom with my viewers, with our viewers. It's awesome. Can't thank you enough, and really, really appreciate it. If anyone wants to get involved in Connect, strike that. Strike that. What am I, in court? If anyone would like to reach out to you and touch base with you, whether it's to retain your digital consulting services or just to say hi, what's the best way to go about it?
Well, jasonfalls.com is a pretty good hub, but I'm also Jason Falls on most social networks, and love to have you guys, read, follow, sign up, reach out. I'm pretty easy to find.
Awesome. Jason, really appreciate it. You're a very, very kind gentleman, and thank you for taking the time, and much success with you and all that you do and with your family too. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye, everyone.